Welcome to Star-Powered Astrology for Changemakers. I'm Leslie Tagorda, your guide, a Hawaii-born Filipino-Jewish astrologer who loves navigating visionaries like you through the spiritual journey of your work so that you can be inspired to lead by your chart and become the luminary leader you were born to be.
Hello, Luminary. It is Leslie Tagorda back for yet another episode as we wrap up 2022. Oh my goodness, I can't believe we are so close to the year end, and I still have so much that I want to share with you before we turn the chapter on 2022. The sound might sound a little bit different because I am back in Hawaii again for a quick trip with just myself and my son to check in on my mom who's still in hospice and to see some family before rushing back to San Francisco. And, you know, as we were flying in yesterday, as we were about to land, like it's such a familiar view to me because I grew up in Hawaii and I'm so grateful and so lucky to be able to come back home often. And as you're landing into Honolulu Airport, you can see like the whole island of Oahu and see all the buildings and recognize everything. And usually things are sunny and clear and bright. But upon arrival this time, everything was in clouds, and my son was asking, like, why are all the fog machines on? Because that's a joke that we have in San Francisco when we look up into the hills and we see the fog rolling over the hills. And, you know, the plane was like really bouncing with some turbulence. It was actually kind of a little bit scary. I was squeezing my son's leg and he was like squeezing my hands, and like my son was in disbelief as we looked out the sky because he had never experienced Hawaii in his living memory with like storm clouds and rain, because generally when we're here in the summer it's like always like super shiny. And so like as I'm sitting here in this hotel room recording, like outside the window, like all of the palm trees are like fiercely swaying, and there's like lightning. Like Hawaii doesn't really get lightning, and just so much pouring rain. Definitely not what my son is used to in Hawaii. So of course I grab my phone and I check the weather app, and I have, you know, my updated iPhone, and the weather app is pretty spectacular, right? It can show you rain and thunderstorm forecasted for the next hour, in addition to like these charts that show the ups and downs of the downpours for like an hourly forecast. And then of course you have your hourly forecasts for the next 24 hours, and then you have your daily forecast for the next 10 days. I'm like, oh my goodness, like look at all of this technology at our fingertips showing us the weather, like not just what's happening in the hour, but over the next 10 days. And so I'm really grateful that I was really prepared because today's the last day of rain, so my son can play at the beach like he's so desperately desired when we come to Hawaii. But because I knew it was going to be a bit windy and stormy and rainy, I packed more pants for him than I normally do for a trip to Hawaii. I packed a ton of activity books, and I prepared to spend a lot of times indoors when not visiting my mom. Now, what if we could do this for ourselves in our lives, right? Plan on a little bit of a detailed scale as well as a large scale. Not to control the rain or be fearful of inevitable storms, but instead so you could plan, prepare, and work with peace with whatever weather is present at the moment. So that's where the cosmos comes in, right? If you listen to the last two episodes that I shared about 2023 and the stars, I was sharing the collective cycles that are on the horizon. Some people call this the cosmic weather. I like to call it like celestial cycles. And I know that was a ton of information to drop on you at the end of the year with everything going on in 2023 and the stars. But if there are three things that you can remember from 2023 and the stars, let it be these three things. So number one, I asked you to crystallize your flow so that you could find your own inner wisdom and compassion to embrace all of the inevitable changes with peace, spiritual wisdom, and acceptance. Okay? Crystallize your flow. Number two, I really wanted you to take in being grateful for going slowly, right? So that you can plan your year ahead and beyond for the long term, for sustainability that is aligned with your capacity and your resources, whether these resources be energetic or time or money or all of it, resources that we don't even know that are coming our way. And number three, so that you can create collective interdependence, so that you can know your one-of-a-kind, unique perspective, contribution, creative process, and leadership, so that you can pour your uniqueness back into the collective as social currency, something that we are all building into the next few years. And so it's these three things that I want you to take in as you look at 2023. Crystallize your flow, the gratefulness for going slow, and how you will contribute to the collective interdependence. I'm reminding us all of this right now because as I've given this masterclass 5 times and then shared it here on the podcast, there's people that I see in their eyes like this sense of fear. And I'm like, no. I'm not sharing this so that we can be fearful. I'm sharing this so that we can be at peace. Because ultimately, that weather app that we look at to check on the weather, it's not because we're going to be screaming around like a chicken, the sky is falling, sky is falling. It's like, no, honey, that's rain. You're not made of sugar. You're not going to melt. You don't have to be so worried about it, right? Pack an umbrella, wear your rain boots, you'll be fine. And so if you tend to be fearful, I don't want you to take this with being fearful. I want you to take this with just an open heart and with courage, because these are all of the collective energies that we are all going to be experiencing. Now, what you do with that energy, right? That is on you. Just wanted to share this because when I was walking home from dropping my son off, he had this winter camp this morning. That is why I'm recording in my hotel room and you don't hear a 6-year-old screaming in the background. When I was walking home, I'm still staying near Waikiki, and literally there was this guy hanging off the side of the building, wiping the windows. And I was like, what is he doing? Why is he hanging outside? Probably 10, 20, somewhere between 10 and 20 floors off the ground. He's attached to the building somehow. It is freaking windy. He's using a squeegee to wipe these windows that are getting pummeled with rain. He's barely hanging on. And I was like, oh my goodness, right? That is what you do not want to do when there is a rainstorm. Did he not look at his app? Did his boss not look at the app and say hey, it's rainy? Did he not even look out at the sky and say, maybe today is not the best day to be cleaning the exterior windows from a high-rise 20 stories up, right? And so that is for all of us, right? So when we think about 2023 and the stars, those are the collective rhythms that now I'm asking you, how do you apply that to your personal rhythms? And so today I really wanted to share with you is, why do we work with these with celestial cycles, both collectively, but today now I want to talk about personal rhythms, how the collective rhythms impact your one-of-a-kind natal chart and spark your personal cycles, right? Of course, as a collective, we all have personal cycles that we all go through. And of course, depending on your natal chart, they're going to by what houses are impacted, what other natal planets are being impacted, will kind of create the story or the signature of those collective cycles, right? We've all heard about your Saturn return. If you're around 29 to 30, you've already experienced it, and all of the challenges that come around that time. You also get a Saturn opposition, if you can remember back to being 14, when those teenage years just seem so out of control. There's these Saturn cycles that come through. Again, not to be fearful of, because I'm going to be talking about how do we intentionally and purposely work with Saturn. And then, of course, earlier in the fall, I had been talking about midlife awakening as I delivered a course on that midlife awakening that really peaks at a Uranus opposition that happens sometime between 36 and 44, depending again on when you were born. We all will get that Chiron return at the age of 50, and if we're so lucky enough to make it to 60, we're all going to experience our second Saturn return. But of course, there are many, 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 many more personal cycles in between that are dependent on what's your sun sign, what's your moon sign, and all of the other workings. And so this is where we start to now personalize these celestial cycles. We look at these celestial cycles because we all have these different personal rhythms, and all of the planets, as they move around the sun, of course, they have their different intervals. And sometimes these cycles and these intervals, they intersect. I just always think of there's like this grand wizard, and he's like turning the dials on all of these clocks, and there's all these different dials that are all intersecting, all in your natal chart. And so when we start to really understand our natal chart and prepare with these transits, as they are called, a transit is when the stars, the planets as they are here and now, as they impact and ping different parts of your natal chart, this gives you your personal celestial cycles. Of course, just like as we look out into the horizon of the collective cycles, the mundane astrology, we look at our own personal cycles also so that we can prepare, so that we can make peace, and that so we can live purposefully. Right? And again, this is about making peace and not living in fear. Because when we feel strategic and prepared, when we feel at peace at the cycle that we are currently in, even if it is a challenging cycle, and when we decide to live purposely with those cycles, this is where our highest potential starts to come in, where we start to attune with the energies at hand, where we start to amplify the highest potentials of those energies, and then we start to attract what is rightfully ours, like the best things instead of the hardest things. And so each of the planets have their own cycles. So today I kind of wanted to go through each of those cycles and what they mean, so that you can understand why we decide to work with our own inner celestial cycles according to the moon, sun, the inner planets, the social planets, as well as the generational planets and beyond. So before I dive into looking at the rhythms of each of these different planets and what they mean when they are going through our chart, I just wanted to remind you that there are just a couple of more days until star-powered circle. The doors are closed until the spring. You've heard me talk about star-powered circle forever now. I am just beyond. I'm just blown away at how whole and complete this feels. I'm super excited to get started. Jeff and I, we've been working really hard getting everything prepared, getting the community set up. But if you don't want to take star-powered circles and commit to it for an entire year, I get it, right? We're all balancing our own resources, our capacity, our time, and our energy. And if you wanted to dip your toe in and try out Star-Powered Circle for just the quarter, this is your time. And each quarter, I'll be delivering one live astrology intensive. And this will be in March. And guess what it's going to be on? Celestial cycles. I'm going to be talking about all of the celestial cycles that I'm going to be covering in today's podcast, but we're going to be diving so much more deeply into how to apply those individual cycles so that we can work and embrace with peace in our own lives and our work. of course, when we're looking at astrology, we're looking at it from both perspectives of like the inner healing and the awakening, as well as the outer achievement and leadership that we want to amplify in our lives. And so I'm really looking forward to celestial cycles. And of course, remember in celestial cycles, this is going to be delivered in the first 4 weeks of March. We will be meeting every Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific. So I'm Pacific time. I'm living in San Francisco. And in week 1, we'll be working with the sun cycle, and how we can plan our annual harvest, all of your vacation times, all your rest times, your restoration times, your harvest times, the times that you're supposed to put in the dedicated hard work. How do you plan your year according to the sun? Week 2, we'll be looking at the moon, right? Dividing your time with not just the moon as it goes through the zodiac and pings all of your natal planets once a month, but also like how do we work with the different phases of the moon? And if there's time, we might even get into some progressed moon cycles. There's so many different ways that we can work with the moon. We could spend like just 4 weeks just talking about the moon. And in week 3, we will be working with the retrograde planets and looking how we can embrace and intentionally work with the inner planet retrogrades, so Mercury, Venus, and Mars retrogrades. And then, of course, in the last week, we're going to be examining the larger success cycles using Jupiter, Saturn, and beyond. Again, there's nothing to be afraid of. And when we start talking about Saturn, as I share all of these different cycles, I will share with you honest ways how I embraced some of these most difficult and challenging transits with as much grace and ease as possible. So if you are excited about working with celestial cycles, get in at starpower.com/circle, because the doors close for the entire quarter until the spring on solstice. So December 21st at 11:59 p.m. Pacific, the doors will close. So if you want celestial cycles, you want to work with new moon intentions with me, you want an entire astrology library, you want to be connected to an amazing astral loving, leadership oriented, change making community, this is your chance. And of course, if you want those one-on-one sessions with me, the only way you can access and schedule a one-on-one session with me is if you're in the circle, because I'm dedicating all of my energy to those that are in the circle. So if you want those one-on-one astroband readings with me, this is your chance. So head on over to starpower.com/circle and join us for the intensive celestial cycles that is upcoming in March. Okay, let's move on to why we work with celestial cycles and how do we personalize it in our natal charts. So I want to start off with the moon. You obviously know already that the moon goes through the zodiac, takes about 29 days to go around the zodiac, spending about 2.5 days in each sign before it goes around. And so moon, you can sense that your hormones are according to a lunar cycle where you have dips and ebbs and flows and energy according to the moon. And so just such a beautiful and easy way to work with the moon is to simply day by day, very easily, you can even use a calendar or some kind of diary and just jot a couple of notes of how you're feeling that day. And after a couple of months, you are probably going to have some really good data collected that, oh, look at this. Every time the moon is sitting on top of my natal Pluto in Libra, I am especially irritable. Imagine that. Or every time the moon is sitting on top in Aquarius on top of my natal sun, I feel extraordinarily creative. We start to notice the cycles. Now, I am not somebody who is, there's so many wonderful guides out there that talk about, women's cycles and their menstrual cycles, and you can really create your schedule according to those cycles. And so if this is something interesting to you, definitely check out Takesha August. She has a beautiful Instagram. I'll tag her in the show notes, as well as Marissa Lawton. She has a new program called Rooted. Both of those amazing women are really teaching others how to work within their own cycles. And so if you're interested in learning more about those kind of minutia moon cycles, definitely follow them. But also just look at your natal chart and start to track, like, as the moon is going day by day, what degree is the moon in? Oh, and it's in Aquarius right now, it's in Virgo right now. What planets and placements do I have in those signs? And just kind of track it and see what comes up for you. Now, of course, there is the sun. And the sun moves about a degree a day. It travels around the zodiac, right? Every year at our birthday, give or take a day before or after, we have our solar return, which means our solar return is when the sun returns back to the exact degree and the minute at the time of our birth. So that will vary from year to year. But the sun, as it goes through our natal chart, specifically by house, shows you the season that you're in. Now, I work in Placidus and I work in tropical astrology, so I love Placidus just because of the wonkiness, where the houses are not all equally sized. Some houses are larger than others, meaning they take more days for the sun to go through than others, and shows me that in your life, whatever house has an elongated time is where you have to spend more of your time in. So for example, I have this amazing client in Alaska, and her chart just fascinates me to no end. When you're born near one of those poles, especially in Placidus, your houses get so misaligned, because you can imagine being born close to the North Pole, where the elliptical is, meaning where the sun and the moon and the planets are traveling. It's really, really, really low on the horizon. Okay, and so the houses, of course, are projections based on that elliptical. I know. Sorry if I talked over your head. I apologize, but if you could just understand, just imagine with me. And so this particular client, one of my favorite longtime clients, she has her 5th house and her 11th house are ultra long, meaning that she has a couple of signs in each of those 5th house and those 11th houses. So that shows me that as the sun is going through her 5th house, as the sun is going through her 11th house, the 5th house of creativity and play and following your passions and your joy, because the sun spends so much time in that 5th house of hers, she is really here to follow her passions and invest all of that time and energy in those 5th house themes. Of course, because on the opposite side of the chart, there's that 11th house, those polar opposites. So the 11th house is going to be equally as big. And so the 11th house is about building community, spending time with friends, going after your hopes and dreams, and of course, social impact. And that is such a big value for this particular longtime customer of mine. And so it makes total sense that she invests so much more of her time in those 11th house topics. And so her life is really, really revolved around that 5th house and the 11th house. And when I ask her what she has plans during those times of year, she's like, oh yes, I'm going on this long adventure, this expedition. I'm going on taking this time and leading this group through all these things. And I'm just like, oh, it's so beautiful and remarkable how she's already tapping in to that annual rhythm of hers. And so the sun, as it goes around the chart, it's really looking at which houses it is traveling through so that you can really plan your year with more intention. I have this other client who she was like, this whole year she's been like launching at these times when the sun was in her water house, and I'm laughing out of like recognition, not she'd be like, Leslie, I am just so tired, all of these things are just not going the way that I want. And I could just hear the exasperation and the frustration in her voice. And I was like, oh my goodness, look at this. Well, you've been consistently launching through these times when you're meant to be resting. Those water houses, the fourth house, the eighth house, the 12th house, when the sun is going through those houses, like, you want to be home at nesting. You want to be doing some deep healing work. You want to be alone and, in solitude kind of things. And she was harnessing the energies quite opposite. And so we noticed some disconnects. We made a plan so that next year she would have an entirely different launch flow. So we can really start to work with the power of the sun just by noticing which house they're going through. Now, those inner planets like Mercury and Venus and Mars, they are moving pretty quickly through the zodiac. They never get too far from the sun. So, I'm not looking them at necessarily by doing some major planning unless they are in retrograde. I love Mercury retrogrades. I've been sharing that for a really long time, how I love Mercury retrogrades and how we can all embrace this time to reboot and reset and reorganize and rethink when Mercury is in retrograde, instead of just trying to like bang our head against the wall in frustration why things are not moving more quickly. Like, hello, people. This is the time to not go quickly. It doesn't mean that everything stops, but these are times in your life and your work where you can do that reflection things, those things that you never have time for, like backing up your computer, like cleaning up all of these old files, or like analyzing some metrics that have been sitting on your back burner for so long. Those are wonderful things to do with Mercury retrogrades. And then, of course, we're still in a Mars retrograde. And really looking at how can we reprioritize and reaffirm the energies that we're going through. And then Venus, of course, we're having a Venus retrograde that's coming up in Leo next year, showing us all like where we can bring in more pleasure and passion and play. But as Venus, looking more so at the house, all the houses that Mars and Venus and Mercury are traveling through, is going to give you more specific insight as to how to personalize those energies. So if you're having Venus retrograde through your third house, like I will be, then in your third house, it's like, how can you bring more fun and passion and play into your communications and expressing your needs? As I'm saying that, I'm like, okay, I heard you, universe. Yes, indeed, I do need to do that. Just like things have gotten a little rough around the edges in terms of how I have been expressing my needs in my family just lately. Whatever. It is. It is what it is. And then, of course, the social planets, right? So Jupiter. Jupiter takes about 12 years to go around the zodiac, and so it spends about a year in a sign, about a year in each one of your houses. And whatever Jupiter touches, it really it likes to expand it. It likes to magnify that, right? Earlier, you've probably heard me talk about how the key to really harness Jupiter's energy is to bring gratitude, to see the silver lining in everything, all of your learnings, your experiences, connecting the dots, all the challenges that you've gone through. Because if you're not feeling at your highest, Jupiter, you know what? Jupiter is just going to magnify that. Jupiter is not just about a glow up, although Jupiter indeed can be a glow up, right? Every 12 years, you will have a Jupiter return. And so this last year, I had a Jupiter return as Jupiter flew through Aquarius. As it was sitting in Aquarius, it went over my own natal Jupiter, and I was expecting like all of these like wonderful things, like just like, boatloads of abundance just showering me. Jupiter doesn't exactly work that way. There was definitely a glow up, but I had to look for it a little bit more. I noticed that my spirituality expanded, my gratitude expanded, but I'd also been having a Saturn transit being going on, and so the Jupiter and Saturn were kind of playing against each other. So, but knowing that Jupiter, sometimes the glow up, those waves of abundance are not always going to be so forthright and so seen. You have to like dig in your spiritual, your ethics, your philosophy and your vision, and definitely thoughts have been connected with Jupiter. So I'm super grateful for my Jupiter return. Now, Jupiter might be on top of your sun next year if you have Aries or Taurus placements. And so, thinking about your creativity expanding, or Jupiter might be on your moon, thinking about your emotional intelligence and your intuition expanding. So really look at where Jupiter is and see if what Jupiter is touching, how it has been expanding or how it has expanded at that time in your life. Now, let's talk a little bit about Saturn, because I know that Saturn often gets a bad rap, right? Because nobody thinks back to their Saturn return and says, oh my gosh, that was such an amazing time of our lives, right? And I know a handful of 30 somethings, or people, the late 20s, early 30s, who are going through their Saturn return with a ton of resistance, right? They know that they're having a Saturn return and they're just, just looking at all the bad things and saying how crappy their life is and all these people that are leaving and all the, just all these things. And that is not how to use Saturn, because Saturn and Jupiter are both planets that really impact our success. Jupiter, again, amplifies. So if you're being grateful, Jupiter will amplify the abundance. Saturn wants to bring things in for success. In order to be successful, one has to commit to the goals that they want that success in. And oftentimes committing means saying no to certain things, creating boundaries. Oftentimes Saturn can feel like the hard and heavy work that, yes, sometimes you need to do some heavy lifting in order to be successful. So if you can remember that all of the things that Saturn is, like the heavy things that Saturn equates to, they're actually all the things that you need to be successful, to have your own inner authority. And so as we work with Saturn now, this is a 30-year cycle. We can look at Saturn as it goes through the different houses. Of course, all of these planets, you're looking at not just what you have natally, but like which houses it's going through in your natal chart. And as Saturn is approaching your midheaven at the top of your chart, this is an all-time 30-year success cycle built upon the hard work you have put into your life. So if you haven't been doing the hard things, if you haven't been committing to your goals, if you've just been blaming others, then guess what? Saturn is just going to make things extra hard for you. But if you've been super committed to your own success, you're going up that hill and you're doing all those things, then Saturn is going to be like, you made it to the top when Saturn hits that kind of mid-heaven place. Now, I've been sharing, over the course of the year, and, Saturn transits can take a few years, 1, 2, even 3 years. Like the Jupiter transits, those happen really fast. Moon, sun, inner planets, those transits also happen really fast. But once we start getting into Saturn, these transits end up taking a little bit longer, right? So Saturn, because it only moves it moves through a sign every 3 years or so, 3.5 years or so, it is going to spend about 3.5 years in one of your houses. And if you have a natal planet, it might spend about a year and a half going back and forth over your rising sign, over your sun, over your moon. And so when you feel that Saturn energy, do know that it might just feel like you have some like extra dark sunglasses on, like the opposite of rose colored glasses. Saturn like kind of squeezing things in again for success. So I knew that I was having some Saturn placements over 2022, and instead of going, woe is me, like life is going to suck, and I kind of knew that I was up for some challenges, I wasn't fearful of it. Instead, I said, okay, what are the things that I really have to let go of so I can focus in on the hard things this year? Over the summer, I really intentionally pulled back from being online a lot, from this podcast a lot, because I knew that I needed to harness that Saturn energy of contracting and going inward and sitting with those challenging experiences that I had in my family and just my own mental health, so that I could crystallize and so I could really focus in and let the new things come forth. I'm really grateful for Saturn for having me come in, because it was in this coming inward process that so many new things, even more brilliant things, built upon my previous hard work that has come forth. So please do not be fearful of Saturn. Embrace Saturn and really harness that process of Saturn to make a commitment, to create boundaries and say no to things, to find your own sense of responsibility and authority so that you can go after your goals, not other people's goals. Okay, so Uranus now. So let's talk a little bit about Uranus. Uranus is even slower and moves. It's further out in the sky. It takes about 80 something odd years to go around the chart. So when Uranus hits, those transits can even be like even up to around 2 years. And Uranus likes to shake things up. Uranus is completely unpredictable. You cannot control Uranus. There is a children's book that my son has. The book is called I Wish You More. It's such a cute book. I can't remember the author right now, but this book is called I Wish You More. And in I Wish You More, there's one line that says, I wish you more, woohoo, then whoa. And that's Uranus. Okay, so Uranus, you're being really asked to embrace the change, embrace the revolution. So if you have any like Taurian energies, like your sun, moon, rising, Uranus has been kind of sitting on that energy for a while. And if you're like in your early 40s, you're approaching that Uranus opposition. And I spent a lot of time talking about that midlife Uranus opposition. It is nothing to be fearful of. I wish that when I was going through my Uranus opposition that I had an astrologer tell me the shakeups that were going through my life, that everything that I was experiencing and the changes and just like the rising to like my energies, that I just felt like I had to like break free from things. Uranian energies. I wish I had those tools, because it would have made things so much more easy to manage, because I could have looked at like my weather app and go, oh, look, oh, Uranus, oh, I'm right in the thick of my Uranus opposition, and I'm going to be sitting with that for another, another year. Oh, great. Okay. But at least a year, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I can handle this for another year. Right? So Uranian energy, embrace the shakeups, go with the flow, know that there's tremendous energy when you're having a Uranus transit. Now Neptune. Neptune transits will be, few and far in between, and these take even longer to move through. And so Neptune is going to feel a little bit more subtle, a little bit more blended, a little less clear. And every time you think you have that clarity of Neptune, like, I got it, it'll disappear. So Neptune's process, of course, is to blend, to find bliss, to find transcendence, to connect with the divine. And sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, a little bit disillusioning. So I'm going to share kind of a embarrassing story from when I was back in my early 30s. And I was desperately single at this time, or unhappily single, I guess, you could say. And at that time, when I look back at my chart, I was definitely having a Neptune transit. Neptune was going through my seventh house of partnerships, romantic partnerships. And I remember there was this guy that I was like madly in love with, or I thought I was madly in love with him. I think this was like very, very, very Neptunian. I had this perception of this relationship that we had that we clearly did not have. And I had put him up on this kind of pedestal of like this relationship that we could have and all these things that we were going to do. And I made up this entire story in my head, which is very unlike me. Very, 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 very much unlike me. And I think at this one point, he had just like completely had it with me. I had sent him this email, like kind of harping all the things that I felt like I wasn't being seen or heard or appreciated. Like, why aren't you calling me? Kind of like, wah, woe was me kind of email to him. And he sent me this very crystal clear, short email that just really burst my Neptunian bubble, my disillusionment. And I look back on it with just some great embarrassment, but I'm like, oh, yeah. That's what a Neptune transit is like. And so when you're going through a Neptune transit, of course, you can purposefully and intentionally look at where maybe you're disillusioned with different parts of your life, but also at its highest point, you can ask how to transcend that. How can you bring more ease and more flow and more bliss and more one love, that unification that Neptune loves to do? Okay. Last thing, Pluto, right? We talk about Pluto here. We love Pluto. As one of my favorite spiritual thought leaders and mentors and friends, Colette Baron-Reid, always reminds me, I have become friends with Pluto. Pluto is my boyfriend. And indeed, we are all here to really make friends with Pluto. Now, you can hear that all of these planets, they transform in their own ways. And Pluto's transformation process is to death and rebirth. It's a complete regenerative cycle in Pluto. And of course, because Pluto is so far out there, when we have a Pluto transit, especially on our sun or our moon or our rising, our big threes, or I had Pluto on my Venus for almost all of 2021 and 2022 as like all of these things. Pluto really transforms at the deepest level because it's essentially killing off parts of it that are not in service to you anymore. There is nothing to be afraid of Pluto because whatever Pluto kills off, and I realize that's a very kind of violent way of looking at things, but from a metaphysical view of killing off, that this spiritual energy is transmuting, it's changing. Right? And so whatever Pluto decides to kill off in your life is something that you were not meant to have anymore. It wasn't going to take you on that next evolution, transformation on your path. And whatever is left in those ashes now are fertile ground for what is to be regenerated. Pluto, of course, just the archetypal phoenix rising from the ashes. And so if you're going through a Pluto transit, which can take many, 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 many years, Pluto is always asking you to dive into the shame, to dive into the grief, to dive into the truth and bring it up to light so that shame doesn't have any place, any hold on you anymore, so that you can transform that. I know when I had my Pluto on my Venus, oh my gosh, I didn't think that my marriage was going to last. But what was really happening internally within me was that I was really learning what I needed in a partnership, what I needed to attract in the people, not just like my husband, but also like just the the people that started showing up in my life, like on my friend circles, just the most powerful, aligned people, because I had changed something fundamental in myself about what it meant for me to be in relationship to others. It was very empowering. And so we also embrace the challenges of Pluto because it empowers us. So, my friends, I've gone through all of the main planets in our solar system to look at why we work with celestial cycles. And of course, I've just given you a really bird's eye view of all the amazing ways to work with these different planetary energies and how we can plan and see the lights at the end of the tunnel when on our own cosmic weather apps, our natal charts. So if you would like to work with me and do a deeper dive into these celestial cycles, again, the doors close at the stroke of midnight the day after solstice. So come on in. It is star powered. So head on over to starpowered.com/circle if you want to come in for a quarter. I have like 2 more mentorship spots left, so if you're interested in working one-on-one with me throughout 2023, those options are there for you as well. So join in before December 21st. The doors closed at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time, December 21st. I would love to have you there with us. All right, my friends, I have one more episode left before I sign off for 2022. That will be a year in review, a year in gratitude episode, just kind of to share all the things that I learned in 2022, despite all of the challenges. All right, well, aloha, my friends. The rain has cleared up, the wind has died down, and it's time to go pick up my son. I'll talk with you more soon. Take care.
As a human design projector, my energy shines more brightly because of people like you who share my work. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help build a movement of innovative astrology and leadership and spark the intuitive revolution, please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share this podcast with your change-making besties. We will all shine brighter together as we create the future we want to see.